Last time we were together, we talked about the passage out of Romans chapter 12, where Paul talks about being joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and then faithful in prayer. And last time we were together, we talked about this idea, or Paul's idea, for us to be joyful in hope. And we talked about how remaining joyful and hope had a lot to do with our focus, where we put our attention. And sometimes in life, it's very easy for us to become self-focused. And whenever we begin to think about ourselves, our cares, our worries, our burdens, the difficulties that we're facing, then it becomes difficult for us to have a spirit of joy. And it kind of feels like the world is pressing in and pressing down upon us. But if we shift our focus, and if we keep our focus on how the Spirit of God is alive and well and at work in our world, and we can see those places where the Spirit is working and moving, where God is at work and good things are happening, then it's easier for us to be joyful. We also talked about how taking our eyes off of ourselves and looking towards other people, and being focused on others is a recipe or a way for us to remain joyful. And so this joyful and hope has a lot to do with our focus. Tonight we're going to look at Paul's words, being patient in affliction. What does it mean for us to be patient in affliction? And this idea of being patient in affliction, it runs counter to a lot of our culture and to a lot of our world. If you or I were to walk into any Walmart, just about basically any store, you're going to find aisle after aisle after aisle of drugs that are there. Their only purpose is to do away with affliction. Their only purpose is to do away with pain. And you can find any drug, a lot of drugs that just to take care of any kind of pain. We don't like pain. And as soon as pain begins to surface in any way, any shape, any form in our lives, it's natural for us to say, oh, I want this gone. I want this done away with. And so Paul's words, when Paul says, hey, be patient in affliction, it runs counter to how we think about life and how we experience life. Like, I know it runs counter to how I've experienced, my cancer journey over the past 7 years. I really, being patient, I want to be healed. I want to be healed today. I want this done with. I want this over. I'm tired of doctor's appointments after doctor's appointments after doctor's appointments. I'm tired of, the next, starting the next round of chemotherapy. Here we go again. I know what this is. Being patient in the midst of affliction is not easy, and it's not something that we would say, yeah, I invite that and I want that to be a piece and a part of my life and in my world. And so we need to ask the question, why does Paul ask that? Why does Paul say that? Why does he say that it's important? And I think it's important to understand that the Apostle Paul is somebody who is familiar with affliction. He went through all kinds of suffering. And, in his writings, he talks about a thorn in the flesh. And he doesn't tell us what that is, but he does say, I've prayed to God continually to remove it, and yet God does not. And so Paul understands what suffering is. He knows what difficulty is, and he says, be patient in affliction. And I think that he does that because as somebody who has had to remain patient in affliction, he has come to know, he has come to experience a side of the Spirit of God that much of the world misses as they flee any kind of adversity that comes into their life. Um, Only those people who have remained patient in affliction can talk about and can bear witness to and can tell the truth about how the Spirit of God met them in the midst of adversity, how the Spirit of God met them in the midst of difficulty, and how the Spirit of God sustained them, renewed them, and helped them to carry on, to help carry on through that. And I think that's important. A few weeks ago, I was in one of those places where I was ready to be done, ready to be totally done with all of the affliction, um, you know, cancer-wise, in my life and in my body. I had gotten to a place where I was beat down and I was tired. Um, and I every morning I get a devotional um, on the email from Richard Rohr. And if you don't get it, you ought to. I mean, he's fantastic. Um, and I was in that mind space where I was ready to be done with affliction. I was ready to be done with pain and all this. Um, and Father Richard's um, devotional that morning, it was entitled "Stay Where the Pain Is." And and my gut reaction as I read the title of that devotional was, and pardon me, but my gut reaction, I said it out loud, was, I don't need this crap. Um, I don't need this. I've dealt with this enough. I've had enough pain. I've had enough suffering. I don't need to read this. Um, but a little bit later on during the day, um, I got smarter, and I sat down and I opened it up, and I started to read it. And what he did is he challenged me, he challenged us to stay where the pain is, to sit with it, to own it, not to run away from it, not to avoid it, and to allow the pain to heal us and to transform us. And in his devotional, he talks about how that if we look back in our lives, and if we're honest about those seasons that have been times of growth, have been times of renewal, that have been times of transformation in our lives, that a lot of them have been connected to some kind of difficulty, some kind of hardship, some kind of pain, some kind of suffering. And we can do one of two things. We can run away from it, or we can sit with it and allow it to do its work of helping us to grow, and helping us to mature. And that while we sit in the midst of our suffering and sit in the midst of our pain, we can ask God, you know, God, would you want to use this in my life, um, to help grow me, to help shape me, to help mature me? How do you want to use this um, in my life? And I think there's another piece to this, to this invitation to be patient in affliction, that I think is even deeper than all of what I've talked about so far tonight. Um, and it's one that I first started wrestling with when I was in Springfield. And we did a Good Friday service with a bunch of American Baptist churches up there in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I had my talk that I was prepared to give, and I had it all prepared, and I was ready to go, and I was driving on my way to the church, and I stopped on the way to the church, and I totally rewrote what I was going to say, because it's what God was working in my own life about, and I felt like I needed to share it. And this is I think is the deeper invitation that we miss sometimes in our pain and in our suffering, is that if we think about everything that Jesus went through and that Jesus endured on Good Friday, that our own suffering is an opportunity, it's an invitation for us to connect with the person of Jesus in a way that is just amazingly deep and profound. I can't understand the perfection side of who Jesus is. I can't understand the ability to do miracles the way that Jesus did. There's so much about Jesus that I cannot connect with. But you know what? I can connect with the suffering because Jesus connected with my suffering. And so if I look at my seasons of suffering as an opportunity for me to connect with the person of Jesus, and rather than me saying, woe is me, why is this happening to me? How come I have to endure this? How come I have to go through this? If I look at it and I say, Jesus went through something similar. Jesus was abandoned. People walked away from him. Jesus underwent physical suffering. Jesus underwent physical death. Like all of that, Jesus and I share in common. And it's an opportunity for me to connect with and to draw deeper in relationship with the person of Jesus. And that's not an easy thing to talk about, I don't think, with people. And I certainly don't think that if you would talk about it, people are going to stand up and jump up and down and say, yeah, I want that. Like I'm going to go look for suffering, so that I can do that. But I think the reality is that in all of our lives, there's going to be seasons where we're going to know difficulty, where we're going to know hardship, where we're going to know suffering. And rather than trying to run away and try to avoid it, maybe if we looked at it and said, Spirit of God, what are you trying to do in my life? Spirit of God, can you use this season to connect me with the person of Jesus? And maybe even if it's just an opportunity for us to, as we experience the physical suffering in our life, to stop and to say, thank you to Christ for the suffering that Christ endured for our behalf. If nothing else, it's a reminder of what Christ went through on our behalf. And simply that reminder and that saying thank you is something that is going to draw us deeper into connection with God. And it is going to be an avenue for renewal and for transformation. And I think that's why the Apostle Paul challenges us to be patient in affliction. I think that's why Father Richard Rohr, says that we ought to stay where the pain is. We ought to sit with the pain and allow it to transform us. Because I think that our pain and our suffering can do something for our soul that only pain and only suffering can do. And we probably ought not run away from it.